Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. So I have a really bad back. I've had 15 surgeries, long story, and had just started at a new school in 2023. After the first 3 weeks, I had to go in for another procedure on my spine. Not a big deal to me, I've been through this before. When I returned, I had documentation of my restrictions and special accommodations that were required. The big three were that I needed extra time to get from class to class, must have someone to escort me, and needed unrestricted access to the elevator. All of these caused recurring problems such as constant harassment by teachers and security about my being in the halls during class time, and why my cousin Jake was out too. He was acting as my escort, as I have anxiety problems and we had the same classes. One day, Mr. Thompson, a particularly grumpy English teacher, stopped us in the hallway. "Why are you two always wandering around during class time?" he demanded. Jake calmly replied, "Sir, we have permission. My cousin here needs extra time to get to class due to his back condition." Mr. Thompson huffed. "Well, make it snappy. You're disrupting other classes." These first two issues were annoying but easy enough to deal with. The real problem was the elevator. I was told multiple times that for security reasons I couldn't have a personal key due to it sharing the same functionality with the interior door keys. I would have been fine with this, as I was told there would always be someone on the same floor as my classes to open the elevator for me. This of course was untrue about 75% of the time. The lack of elevator access meant that I was always stuck in the halls when other students were going class to class, and was consistently late due to having to wait for someone to come by and open the door for the elevator. This also meant that I would sometimes be stuck waiting through the entire lunch period, and due to my absences, I couldn't afford to simply go to lunch afterward. After about 3 weeks of this, I was tired of not getting to eat lunch, so I did one of the stupidest things I could have attempted and tried to use the stairs. For context, I wasn't on crutches, I was using a full-blown walker. About halfway down to the landing, I fell. Hard. As lunch was letting out, my friend Sarah found me. "Oh my God, Alex, are you okay?" she cried out. I groaned in pain. "No, I think I really messed up this time." Sarah quickly got someone to help pick me up and they carried me to the office. Another of my friends went to find my other cousin Mia. Jake wasn't there due to being sick, so I was without an escort because I couldn't bear the thought of, gasp, a stranger escorting me. When Mia got to the office, she managed to calm me down enough to give them my mother's number. Now, my mother is quite hot-tempered, but can usually keep a level head. When she heard I fell, she was there in record time. As soon as she arrived, she asked, "What happened, Alex?" I reluctantly admitted, I didn't want to miss lunch again, so I tried to use the stairs. Big mistake. That set off a nuclear explosion. She immediately turned around and shouted, "I demand the principal and VP get their asses in here right now!" As soon as Principal Davis and VP Roberts walked in, she started berating them in a fashion not suitable for most adults to hear, let alone kids. When VP Roberts made an offhand remark about my condition, my mother lunged at him. She was quickly swarmed by local sheriffs that provided security for the school's entrances and office. We were escorted out, and after looking at the file and realizing Jake and I had the same address, they figured out that I didn't actually live in the school district. Now, my grandmother's address was listed as she looked after me after school until around 8 p.m. She was also raising Jake after an issue between her and my aunt. They used this as grounds to expel me, and Principal Davis coldly stated, "You can be some other school's problem now." I was then enrolled at the school near my house and had to have yet another surgery to repair the damage that was done as a result of my fall and redo the work of the previous procedure. I had gotten multiple statements from teachers as well as my doctors, and my parents were moving forward with a lawsuit naming VP Roberts, Principal Davis, and the county school board. We were contacted by a lawyer, Mr. Hernandez, who had won multiple cases against our school board, some of which went to the state Supreme Court. He told us he would take our case pro bono. "I'm getting tired of going against this board," Mr. Hernandez explained. "I think a case like this might be what it takes to finally fix their mess." Fast forward 11 months and I was walking out of court with a settlement to cover all my procedures, as well as a written confirmation that the school would be going through a complete administrative overhaul. Principal Davis and VP Roberts would be let go and have their administrative credentials revoked in our state. My new school was informed on day one about my medical requirements and my need for a personal elevator key by the superintendent and the head of the State Board of Education. As we left the courthouse, my mom hugged me tightly and said, "I'm so proud of you, Alex. You stood up for yourself and made a real difference." I smiled, feeling a mix of relief and satisfaction. "Thanks, Mom. I just hope no other kid has to go through what I did." The next one is an entitled people's story. I've lived on my family's farm for most of my life. It's been in our family for generations, passed down from my great-grandparents. We're talking about 50 acres of beautiful land just outside the city limits. I love it here. The peace, the quiet, and the freedom to do what I want on my own property. That is, until the new housing development sprung up next door about 5 years ago. Don't get me wrong, I don't mind having neighbors. But these weren't just any neighbors. They came with their fancy homeowner association and all its ridiculous rules. At first, it wasn't too bad. They mostly kept to themselves and I kept to myself. But then they got a new homeowner association president, Karen. Yeah, I know, fitting name. She was one of those people who thought rules were made to be enforced, even if they didn't make sense or apply to you. It all came to a head last summer. My family and I were having our annual 4th of July barbecue. We'd invited friends and relatives from all over, and about 30 people were scattered across our backyard. Kids were running around playing tag, adults were chatting and laughing, and I was at the grill flipping burgers and hot dogs. That's when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of someone clearing their throat loudly, trying to get attention. I turned around to see Karen standing there, her arms crossed and a scowl on her face that could curdle milk. "Excuse me," she said in that snooty tone that made me want to roll my eyes, "but you're in violation of several homeowner association rules right now." I blinked at her, confused. "I'm sorry, what?" She pulled out a clipboard. I kid you not, she actually brought a clipboard, and started listing off violations. First, you're having a gathering of more than 10 people without prior homeowner association approval. Second, your grass is at least half an inch too long. Third, that shed over there isn't an approved color. Fourth, I cut her off. "Hold on a second. Who are you and what are you doing on my property?" She looked offended that I dared to interrupt her. "I'm Karen Johnson, the president of the Sunnyside Estates Homeowners Association, and I'm here because you're breaking our rules." I couldn't help it. I laughed. "Ma'am, I hate to break it to you, but I'm not part of your homeowner association. This is my family's farm. We've owned this land for over 100 years. Karen's face turned an interesting shade of red. "That's impossible. All the properties in this area are part of the homeowner association." "No," I said slowly, as if explaining to a child. "Your development is next door. This is a separate property. We're not even in the city limits." She sputtered for a moment, then rallied. "Well, your activities are disturbing our residents. The noise is well within legal limits," I finished for her. "And frankly, it's none of your business what I do on my own property." By this point, several of my guests had wandered over, curious about what was going on. My brother-in-law, who happens to be a lawyer, stepped up beside me. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice calm but with an edge of steel. Karen turned to him, probably hoping for an ally. "Yes, this man is violating multiple homeowner association rules and refusing to comply." My brother-in-law smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Ma'am, as my brother-in-law has already explained, this property is not part of your homeowner association. You have no authority here. In fact, you're currently trespassing on private property." Karen's face went from red to white so fast I was worried she might faint. "Trespassing? But I'm the homeowner association president, which gives you exactly zero authority outside of your homeowner association," my brother-in-law said. "Now I suggest you leave before we're forced to call the sheriff for trespassing and harassment." For a moment, I thought Karen might argue more, but then she turned on her heel and stormed off, muttering something about talking to her lawyer. We all had a good laugh about it after she left, and it became the highlight story of our barbecue. But I knew it wasn't over. Karen didn't seem like the type to let things go easily. Sure enough, a week later, I got a letter from the Homeowner Association filled with legalese about community standards and visual continuity. They were demanding that I comply with their rules or face fines. I took the letter to my brother-in-law, who was more than happy to draft a response. His letter was a masterpiece of legal smackdown, explaining in no uncertain terms that their homeowner association had no jurisdiction over my property, that any attempt to enforce their rules would be considered harassment, and that any further communication should go through him. We didn't hear anything for a while after that, and I thought maybe they'd finally gotten the message. But then, about a month later, I woke up to find an official-looking notice stuck to my front door. It stated that I was being fined $500 for continued non-compliance, and that a lien would be placed on my property if I didn't pay. That was the last straw. I called my brother-in-law, and we decided it was time to take action. We filed a lawsuit against the homeowner association for harassment, trespassing, and attempting to extort money under false pretenses. The case never made it to court. As soon as their lawyers saw our evidence, including security camera footage of Karen and other homeowner association board members coming onto my property to post notices, they quickly offered to settle. In the end, the homeowner association had to pay a significant sum for their harassment, publicly apologize, and agree to never attempt to enforce their rules on non-homeowner association properties again. Karen was forced to step down as president, and I heard later that she ended up moving away, unable to face the embarrassment. As for me, I used some of the settlement money to build a nice, tall fence along the property line between my farm and the housing development. And you can bet that fence isn't painted in any homeowner association approved colors. The whole experience taught me the importance of knowing your rights and standing up for yourself. It also made me appreciate my family's legacy even more. This land has been ours for generations, and no power-hungry homeowner association president was going to change that. These days, our barbecues are even better. We still invite all our friends and family, but now we also invite our neighbors from the housing development. The cool ones who were just as fed up with Karen and her rules as we were. It's become a bit of a neighborhood tradition, a symbol of community that no homeowner association could ever create with their rule books and clipboard-wielding presidents. And every time I fire up that grill, I can't help but smile, remembering the day an homeowner association president learned a valuable lesson about minding her own business. Life on the farm is good, and it's going to stay that way. Homeowner association free. The next one is a petty revenge story. The day before graduation my junior year, I was in the cafeteria waiting for the bell to ring for the end of lunch. It was common for students to start lining up at the doors waiting for the bell. I usually didn't and would just wait in my seat with my friends. The bell rang and I was about to stand up when I was clobbered on the side of my head with an open Trix yogurt. Everyone was leaving and there was no indication as to who threw it. My friends helped me clean it off as much as possible, and I stopped at the bathroom to try to wash it out. I got most of it out, but I had to hurry out to the football field for band practice. The band was practicing for the graduation ceremony the next day, so at noon on the wide-open football field, the rest of the yogurt baked into my hair, and I was scratching dried yogurt out of my hair until I could shower. 15 years later. I'm sitting at the table with my cousins at my aunt's house. My younger cousin was talking about all the immature things he used to do in high school, including opening the Trix yogurts and tossing them over his shoulder. I said, "That was you?" I then proceeded to tell the story of my ordeal while he busts a gut laughing at my misfortune. So 15 years after it happened, I found my yogurt pelter, and it was my annoying younger cousin. For the past 3 years, at every get-together, he calls me over to tell the new person the yogurt story. So, I've been planning for the past year to get my revenge by taking a yogurt and smashing it on his head. Tonight, at the seafood boil my family threw, I got my revenge. While he was sitting at the table, cracking open crab legs, I took the yogurt, came up behind him, and enjoyed smashing it all over his head. I rubbed it in, and it went all down the side of his head, into his beard, and onto his shirt. Then I leaned down and told him, "We're even now." The next one is a malicious compliance story. This was almost 10 years ago, contracting for a very large financial services provider. For some context, team manager was promoted to a new division, and the team, 8 of us working across 2 shifts to cover international as well, were left with 2 team leaders. We'll call them Moron Boy and Passive Gal, to run this show until the new manager was hired. New MGR joined 6 months later, or early, depending on perspective, and probably because of me. My job in a nutshell was to onboard new employees into all the required systems for their daily functions, as well as set up their email and AD accounts for server access, which was dumped on my lap a month into my job because I had prior experience, so said Moron Boy. I didn't mind the email and AD because it's literally 2 mins per account and didn't affect my central function by more than 20 mins a day. It'll make sense soon. And audits were 30 mins a week. This all happened from a centrally shared mailbox. It's requests, so you can't determine how busy you are. On to the fun. Almost before the door hit the manager on the way out, Moron Boy and Passive Gal call us into a meeting room and states that we must do no less than 10 requests a day. all to be logged on their call logging system, and here's the contract amendments we must sign or be fired. Being a contractor, you'd think I would shut the hell up, but nope, I just can't do being kicked in the balls, so I piped up, I don't see how it's possible to guarantee 80 requests a day minimum for every team member to meet the requirement. Why not scalar the ticket count and see who did what? His face turned a deeper color and he shouts at me to mind my own business. I don't know what I am talking about. Cue my MC, which included calling my contract house manager, Sassy and Funny Gal, explained what was happening, and after she could breathe again from laughing so hard, she told me not to get her fired. I head back to my desk, knowing full well audits are about to start in a week, and I get multiple requests to make amendments on accounts to test Active Directory security. And LO, here it begins. I got an email 2 days later to prep for a massive test. I am tasked to amend nearly 6,000 accounts with new settings, and then change them back on request with minimal impact to the users during working hours, so I needed to do this quickly. Now, any tech worth his measure out there will know almost anything is scriptable. I set it all up, called my mate at service desk, and here's the funny thing. He also has a script to log multiple tickets. Roll on D-Day. I take the auditor's call at 8 a.m. to make the change. I send the email to my S-desk mate and he logs the tickets in a record 30 seconds. My mailbox booms with 6K open tickets. I run my script and 90 seconds later, bam, job done. I carried on with my core function. 3 hours later, auditor called me to revert. I ran my second script, everything back to normal, called my mate to close the tickets, and a minute later my mailbox frazzled for a bit getting 6K closure tickets. It's at this point I smile, sit back, and start browsing all my meme sites. Yes, joys of AD control, I gave myself unrestricted internet access. A nice perk. Anywho, in less than an hour, Passive Gal comes to me to ask what's happening. I simply state that the contract amendment they forced on us clearly means I don't have to work for 200 days. So, I'll be sitting here enjoying my time off, or I can do it from home. Either way, I'm ahead of the curve. She walks away and Moron Boy storms over demanding I get back to work. I repeat what I said to Passive Gal. He spluttered for a while and he huffs off. True to my word, I sat at my desk doing nothing, but sadly it didn't last 2 days before the head of the dep called me in. After an initially aggressive start to the meeting on his part, I got to explain the sitch. I wasn't even to the good part and he drops his head into his palm, calmly listens to the story, asks me for a copy of the amendment, and thanks me for the time. 2 hours later, he calls me back and asks me, with Sassy and Funny Gal in the room, what would it take to GRT me back to work? I decided to keep it simple, formally retract the stupid amendment and pay me out for the time spent on the audit, which is 600 days, as per the contract amendment. He blowfished for a few seconds, agreed, and I left for the day. Wake up the next morning to a huge jump in my bank account with an email confirming I'll be back in the office, please. I am a man of my word. I was back at my desk, working as usual, and for some reason, Moron Boy and Passive Gal never came near me again, even when I shifted to another dept. The next one is an entitled people's story. I, 23F, work the night shift as a CNA in a nursing home. I don't know why the other CNA I worked with last night felt the need to target me, especially since it was my first time working with her. She's only been there for a couple of weeks. But she very obviously singled me out looking for a problem. I am a hard worker and have zero interest in any kind of drama. I come to work to take care of my patients, get paid, and then leave. I might be overly bothered by this because I have anger issues that I work hard to keep under control due to past trauma. I know I have to keep it together to be successful in my dream career, so I just need to vent. This lady came in a few minutes after me, and I didn't recognize her, so I went out of my way to be helpful. I asked her if she was familiar with the patients she was assigned to and gave her a rundown of their needs, letting her know where I'd be if she needed help. After I finished checking on all the patients I was assigned to care for that night, I sat down and started taking notes for a class I'm taking. She came up and asked for help repositioning a patient in bed who couldn't move on her own, so I dropped what I was doing and went to help her. To reposition a patient, you first use the bed remote to lift the bed to above waist height so you don't hurt your back bending over. Then you get someone on each side of the bed to lift and turn the patient. We got to the patient's room and I grabbed the bed remote and started lifting the bed, but it paused for a second because of a short in the wires. Cheap facility. It took me a little more than 2 seconds to adjust and start lifting the bed again. The other CNA raised her voice at me, with attitude, saying the bed needed to be way higher than that. I explained that I was trying to lift the bed, but it paused for a second and assured her I knew what I was doing. She then went off on me about what I am and am not allowed to say to her, acting so aggressively over nothing that even the patient and her roommate were looking at her confused and concerned. I didn't want to feed into her obvious attempts to make a scene, so I shrugged it off, finished helping her reposition the patient, and then walked out of the room and back to the nurse's station. Moments later, I got up to answer a call light. As I was walking back to the nurse's station, the other CNA was standing there. Before I could make it back to my seat, she started yelling at me about how she is 47 years old with 20 years of experience and that I better watch my mouth. She went on and on, bringing up my age several times and saying things like, "I don't know what your problem is, but you will respect me." Even though I literally did not disrespect this woman once and even went out of my way to be nice to her. Blah blah blah. The whole time I kept repeating that I'm not going to argue with her, that I'm just here to do my job, and that I don't care about her age or work experience. I told her to stop and that I wasn't going to argue multiple times, but eventually I just walked away because I felt myself starting to shake and my heart began to race. I didn't want to go off and regret it later. As I mentioned, I have anger issues, so I got out of sight, locked myself in a bathroom, and shook while trying to catch my breath, with my heart racing and pounding. I was nearly in tears because this woman was almost in my face over something stupid, and I couldn't blow up about it, even though I wanted to so badly. After I pulled myself together and stopped shaking, I walked out to the nurse's station and told the nurse who witnessed it all what had happened in the patient's room. Meanwhile, I could hear the other CNA talking loudly to the other nurse all the way down the hall, saying things like, "I didn't even do anything to that little white girl. All I did was ask for help with Mrs. Patient's name. And she gave me attitude about how she knows what she's doing, like I haven't been doing this for 20 years, blah blah blah." Even though I had actually dropped what I was doing to help her with zero complaints. For the rest of the shift, she was staring me down and gossiping with the other nurse, but would get quiet and try to listen to what I was saying to my nurse, even though it was all work-related. I'm thinking about asking the Dion, pretty much like a supervisor to nursing staff, to watch the camera footage at the nurse's station so they can see how she jumped down my throat when I was minding my own business. But I don't want to cause more problems. I probably sound ridiculous for getting so worked up over someone acting like a child, but it really had me struggling to hold back. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.